everyone would take their seats. Would everyone take their seats, please? Would everyone take their seats? This is challenge. Test, test, test. Test. What? Can you hear? Okay. Well, good afternoon. There's a great buzz in the air. It's great to see so many of you here, and I'd certainly like to welcome all of you, both here on site and those of you over the web, to today's Georgia Tech Clean Energy Speaker Series. And today, as you walked in the building, you could see that this is a pretty special program because we have on display, thanks to Georgia Power and Tesla, a Tesla Roadster. So, and I think is there a drawing for that car later on? But by the way, this morning I checked eBay, and there are 3 Tesla Roadsters on eBay if you just happen to have the fire to buy one, or the passion to buy one. So I'm Ben Hill with Georgia Tech's ATDC program, and I'd certainly like to welcome you to today's third part of an ongoing discussion on the smart grid. The first program we looked at was just the state of the smart grid. Last month's program was data management and the smart grid. Of course, today's program is electric vehicles and the impact on the grid. And next month's program will be on intelligent power and interstate transmission. So stay tuned for that program. A number of individuals and organizations make this program series possible. And I'd like to recognize all those who support this series. First, we have an extraordinary group of advisors. Jay Hakes with the Carter Library. Let's see. Yeah, Marilyn Brown, in Public Policy at Georgia Tech. Valerie Thomas, in Public Policy and Industrial Engineering at Georgia Tech. David Scholl in Chemical Engineering. Deepak Devan in Electrical and Computer Engineering. And Ken Ostrowski with McKinsey & Company. In addition, we have a number of organizations which provide support. First, I'd like to recognize and thank the law firm Sutherland for their kind of prescient support of this whole program series. They began supporting this series in November of '09 when we looked at energy demand in the Southeast. In addition to Sutherland, a knowledge partner is McKinsey & Company. We also have the support and assistance of a number of organizations like South Base Institute, Georgia Tech, the Economic Enterprise Innovation Institute, the Byers Institute for Sustainable Systems, the Georgia Tech Strategic Energy Institute, and the Georgia Tech Office of Sustainability. So there are a number of folks who kind of share this common vision of having an objective, rational discussion about energy demand for the future and the role of clean technology in meeting that demand. Today's program and previous programs, both the webcast and the slides, can be found on our website, secleanenergy.org, and today's program will be on the website in by the end of this week. For those of you who are participating over the web, I would ask that you email your questions, should you have some. You can email those questions to me, ben.hill@gatech.edu, and I will pass those questions along to our speakers. once again, my email address is ben.hill@gatech.edu. Next month's program, as I mentioned, is on intelligent power and interstate transmission. And we're going to have a little logistical change of the program. Rather than being the last Wednesday of the month because of Labor Day, we're going to move the program to so Labor Day, Memorial Day. I always get them Memorial Day. Sorry, I always transpose them. That's great because you're listening. I appreciate that. We're going to move the program to Wednesday, May the 18th. May the 18th, and the location will be in the College of Management in the LaCroix Auditorium. So just mark that on your calendars. Wednesday, May 18th, and the LaCroix Auditorium in the College of Management, which is directly across the street. At this point, I'd like to introduce Tom Warren with Sutherland, Asbill, and Brennan, who will introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here on behalf of Sutherland. We're a proud original supporter of this Clean Energy Speaker Series. Sutherland is a national law firm with an energy group of over 50 attorneys. We have a significant focus on renewable energy, doing all areas of renewable energy, from transactions to financing to regulatory issues, in all the different aspects, all the different technologies of renewable energy. And we're excited to support this series and engage in the discussion of all the topics we've had. I have a great panel today for you guys of 3 speakers with different perspectives on electric vehicles and the grid. I'll introduce the 3 in the order they'll speak this morning. First is Tom King. He's the director of the Energy Efficiency and Electricity Program at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Tom's responsible for leading, coordinating, and implementing Oak Ridge National Lab's research and development of portfolio of projects for 2 different DOE offices, including solar, wind, hydropower, biomass, geothermal, distributed energy systems, transmission reliability, electric grid modeling, etc. Prior to joining Oak Ridge National Labs, he was at Progress Energy, where he had various management positions in fossil-based power generation. Next is Ben Eccles. Ben's a program manager of electric transportation at Georgia Power Company. Ben manages the electric transportation program for Georgia Power and has been involved in electric transportation since 1997. He works with manufacturers, utilities, and research and policy organizations across the country, representing Georgia Power and Southern Company, where he focuses on evaluating economic efficiency and environmental benefits of using electricity as a transportation fuel. Then last is going to be Paul Lamangino, who is engineering tools manager with Tesla Motors. Paul joined Tesla in 2006 to define and implement a computer-aided design product data management strategy for the company. Since then, he's worked to define tools and methods to streamline product development through concept creation, engineering, manufacturing, and service. He was the program manager for the Roadster 2 and made the Roadster 2 a profitable venture for Tesla. Prior to joining Tesla, he had over 10 years of experience in the automotive, high-tech, and process engineering domains, including recently at Ford, where he was doing computer-aided design with respect to the Ford Fusion, among other things. Please welcome the speakers and Tom King.
Well, thank you. As we transition here with the computers, it's a pleasure to be here. Just for your interest, I submitted my name multiple times for that Tesla. I need to get back to Oak Ridge before these storms come through, so I need something a little speedy to get up there. But for those that aren't familiar with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, located just outside Knoxville, Tennessee, $1 billion budget, looking at everything from the science, the basic energy science, all the way through the applied energy programs to getting technologies out the door. So, we like to think of ourselves as the coming up with the ideas, but also being able to bridge these ideas through the commercialization. And that takes a lot of partnerships with industry as well as universities. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking about something that we've been focused on at the laboratory for a number of years, and that's this integration between the electrification of the transportation system with the electric grid. And through this presentation, I know we only have 20 minutes. We could probably talk 20 days on this topic, but I'll try to lay the basic framework that you probably have seen in some of the prior speaker series, but setting the stage for what the demand looks like. But looking at the infrastructure that's tied to this, where energy storage devices are, and then dealing with the grid impacts. And it's going to be high level, but it could be an opportunity for further discussion in the Q&A. So as we jump into this, we're all familiar with the impacts of the importance of energy as we move forward and the challenges that we face as a nation. But this ultimately impacts the quality of life that we see today. But where's the quality of life that's going to be for our children and grandchildren? That's one of the key things that forms and focus of the energy side that's so important as we move forward. So when you look at the energy issue, it boils down to two things. One is the energy security, and the other piece is the environmental impacts. And so if we break those two elements down, and I'm not sure what's going on with the the high tech. I'm from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We say technology, we've got it covered. And here we are under 2 weeks now, we've gone through this cyber attack. And I don't know if you've read about it in the paper, but the ability for us to communicate it's taken us back to the 80s. And there's been this aggressive, the advanced persistence threat that has been going on, and it has done so much in the way of wreaking chaos in the communication side. So here we are, technology, and I'm stumbling over all this stuff, but I apologize. So if we look at energy, it boils down to two things. First thing is the energy security side, but then you also have to look at the environmental side. And these are challenges that we have while maintaining an economic position. So looking at the energy demands that we see going forward, from the global side, energy demand and population is going to continue to rise. And if you look over on the right chart, this shows energy consumption growth. But the important thing that you see here is the electricity generation, and this is index-based. It goes back to 1990, and you can see energy consumption is going up, but electricity generation is going up at a faster pace. And this is telling of where there's going to be a shift in the electrification. It's not just using the energy, but the energy is going towards to the electricity side. And this is going to place a burden on an already stressed electric delivery system that we have in this country. When we look at the spaghetti chart, this is like, whoa, what's going on here? But we have about 100 quads. We consume about 100 quads of energy. And this provides a breakdown of the energy consumption here in the U.S. And you can see we waste a lot of energy. So here's the energy coming in, energy going out. This is the utilized energy, and this is the wasted energy. When we look at petroleum, most of the petroleum side feeds into the vehicles, as you can see, and transportation over here. Some is for industrial and the heating side. Okay, so what we want to do when we look at the energy side, it's displacing the petroleum instead of relying on other sources and countries for this. We want to try and become more independent. So it's moving the petroleum side to the electricity side that you see up here. So it's a complicated chart, but it really shows kind of the balance that we have to look for and where we have to move from where we are today, about 40% petroleum. We need to move that towards the electricity side. So there's been talk about energy independence, being energy independent. What does that mean? and it means many different things to different people. But I think at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, we have David Green, who's one of our corporate fellows. He's come up with the definition of what it means to be energy independent. And I think it's pretty good. If you look at the Websterian, it's not subject to control of others, is what independence means. But if we look at, well, what does energy independence mean, and have we ever been there? Well, David's definition of energy independence is, dealing with energy that's 1% or less of our GDP. With this air of, plus 95% from a statistical side. So he's an economist, so he throws in that. But if you look at just the economics, 1% below GDP, were we ever there? And as you can see in this chart, during the 90s, we were below that 1%. So we could say that we were energy independent during that time. And if you recall, the price of gallon was around $1. It was about $1 a gallon. We didn't even think about that at all. So the question is, and his analysis, can we get there? What's it going to take to be able to get there? And there's no silver bullet when we look at this. We're going to need all forms of generation, and we also have to look at the distribution, the end use side. So we need to increase the supplies, the resources by 30% while decreasing about 30% on the end use side. So it creates a lot of challenges, and when you start to look at these pathways from energy security to climate change, the technology pathways and energy solutions, a lot of it is looking at the electrification of the transportation system as well as clean energy generation. And when you start to go down the path, it's this electrification and the energy solutions that we face, it's going to create this additional burden on already stressed grid. And planning as we go forward is going to be so critical. So that kind of lays a foundation for where and a lot of the reasons why the Department of Energy is moving in the direction it is. It's focusing a lot on this electrification. So the challenges, three things that I'll be talking about is from the infrastructure, the technology, and the impacts on the grid. If you look at the infrastructure, there's significant challenges that we have. We can't just switch over to electric vehicles in one night. It's going to take a long time for that transition because the systems that we have, they've made a huge capital investment, and these things just don't turn over overnight. On the electricity operation side, one of the things in talking to our utility partners that we have, they love the idea of electrification of transportation because they're dealing with filling in the valleys at night. And so if everybody can plug in their vehicles overnight, well, that's great for the utility companies. The problem is, how often are we going to do that? And I look at the laptops. Everybody's got a laptop. And when you're in meetings, everybody's looking for the outlets, trying to plug in their laptops. It's going to be the same thing for vehicles. If we all are driving electric vehicles, it doesn't matter if we have 3/4, half charge left that'll be enough to get us back home. We're going to want to plug in to make sure we have a fresh battery life. So, it gives us a little bit more flexibility. So there's a lot of challenges when it comes to that in the electricity operations. And dealing with vehicle-to-grid communication, it's necessary. And that gets into the rates at which you charge the batteries. If for utilities, they want to be able to provide flexibility. So maybe you need some power, and so there's some regulation that you might be able to do in the speed and rate at which you charge. But there needs to be some communication that goes on. Also, pricing of the electricity, there's been a lot of discussion. How do you deal with pricing when people are parking their cars on the street plugging in? So still challenges associated with that. As you can see with some of the charging equipment, you have level 1, level 2 charging, then there's a fast charging level 3. It isn't necessarily something you can do that's easy. Depending on, as we go forward, a lot of people are we are in I want it now, I want it here, I want it now, and I want it cheap. Well, when we start looking at level 1, level 2, we're looking at 8 hours of charging. If we get to the fast charging, that's 30 minutes. We look at that fast charging infrastructure, that's going to create some complexity and the impacts on the grid, and we'll see some of those challenges. And then looking at the last mile of the grid system in the neighborhoods, that's where we see likelihood of if there is a fast deployment of these technologies and the utilities can't balance this and plan for it, you might see some of the transformers start, popping here and there. But on the infrastructure side, the Department of Energy has made a significant investment through stimulus funds. It's, as you can see here, the largest ever deployment of electric drive vehicles. 13,000 vehicles of various sizes are being funded and supported. Getting the vehicles out there is one thing, but you really need that infrastructure. And so tied with the vehicle deployment, there's a lot of focus and emphasis on the installation of charging systems. And so as you can see here, there's 22,000 level 2 charging sites as part of these projects. And they're going to be collecting a lot of information from, what time people are charging, the rates at which these batteries are being charged. And so you can see the locations of these projects throughout the country. It's distributed broadly from the left coast all the way to the right coast. You don't see a lot in between, in the Midwest, but, the projects and efforts that are going on are in heavily populated areas, and that's where you're looking at some of the rollouts. I mentioned some of the data that's being collected, and you can see here from the charging side and the driving side, this is some of the information that's being collected through these 5 or 6 companies that are actually said, this one is TBD. So there's about 7 different major projects that are going on right now, and a lot of data is going to be collected. At Oak Ridge National Laboratory, we're involved in one of these projects, the Ecotality project you can see here. Within that project, it's looking at 5 different regions across the country. The East Tennessee region is one of those regions. So we're looking at deploying roughly about 1,000 electric vehicles through Nissan, the Leaf. And it's tying in Nashville, Chattanooga, as well as Knoxville. There's going to be fast charging in between each of those 3 cities. So with the deployment of the vehicles as well as associated charging, and you'll see some of the numbers on the infrastructure that's tied to it. Now we're looking at going beyond that and looking at solar covered parking that ties in with the electric charging infrastructure, and being able to try to look at the optimization. So we realize that the cost is going to be a little bit higher for this, and we're probably looking at something that's going to be, pushed off further downstream. This is a demonstration and looking at what are some of the capabilities and opportunities there could be down the road. But we are installing 25 solar covered parking spots. These have been installed at Oak Ridge at the laboratory. We have installed the EVSE, as well as we are working on getting some energy storage technologies installed as well. So these are going to be initially lead acid batteries, but we're also looking at some lithium ion batteries that are going to be installed, and we're going to be looking at the optimization of the charging, the charge rates, as well as when you can tie in the electricity from the batteries. And looking at, we own our own distribution system at the lab, so we can see and understand the impacts that we're seeing at the laboratory. On top of that, there's a unique piece. People talk about V2G, vehicle to grid, discharging the batteries to support the utility systems. And right now, energy storage devices are not ready for V2G, because if I'm an owner of an electric vehicle, I have $10,000 or roughly $10,000 sitting under the hood with the battery pack. Discharging that battery pack eats away at the life of the system. And how much am I going to get back for that? Probably isn't going to be $10,000. So the whole V2G concept is going to be probably pushed down the road some, but there are some at least from discharging the battery, but there are some concepts that we're going to test through this arrangement, and that's being able to take the power electronics and the charging infrastructure utilizing that infrastructure to provide these ancillary services. And it gets pretty complicated, but there's this reactive power piece that you can provide these reliability services to the grid. So we're going to be testing some of those concepts and elements. As you can see from the deployment side, you look at the number of the solar assisted charging. It's going across East Tennessee. There's going to be roughly 1,500 level 1 charging at residential homes, and then there's going to be corresponding charging infrastructure that's tied into retail homes. So it's, one of the challenges, great, I can charge at home, but in public forums, I'm not going to be able to do that. Well, this project is looking at addressing those infrastructure challenges. We also are developing technologies at the laboratory that looks at wireless charging, and this is inductive charging. So we have some unique ideas, and for the sake of time, I've just included these in the slides. But this is something, instead of having the wires and plugging in, you can just pull over in your garage where you have the antenna in the car, receiver down below. This is dangerous there. And it doesn't have to be coupled directly immediately over it. The efficiencies that we've seen here is greater than 90% transfer electricity over about a 10-inch range. So really unique technology that's being demonstrated at the laboratory. When it comes, I mentioned that energy storage isn't ready for prime time. Batteries aren't ready for prime time for this vehicle-to-grid interaction and discharging. A lot of improvements are necessary to get these costs down. So as you can see, looking at the cost reductions, dealing with performance, and then the abuse and safety, and the safety tolerance needs to be continued. So at ORNL, we're addressing two major problems, dealing with manufacturing, focusing on innovative manufacturing approaches within the U.S., and then dealing with the durability of the technology. And these two videos, I'm going to show two videos, and it kind of summarizes some of the areas that we're focused on. So let's see. Here's another test, right? If we can get the technology, and if we can't, we'll move on. It doesn't work. So, and now everything is locked up. Well, it's really cool video. It really is. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
In order to understand performance limitations and failure mechanisms of batteries, one has to investigate processes on the micro and nanometer scale. A typical failure mechanism in lithium metal batteries is dendritic growth. During discharge, lithium is stripped off the anode surface and migrates to the cathode. During charge, lithium is deposited back on the anode. Repeated cycling can result in stripping and redeposition that roughens the surface. The roughening of the surface changes the electric field and draws more metal to spikes that are beginning to grow. These can grow with tremendous mechanical force, puncture the separator, and directly connect the anode with the cathode, which can create an internal short circuit. This can lead to an uncontrolled discharge reaction, which heats the cell and causes additional exothermic reactions, leading to what is called thermal runaway. Oak Ridge National Laboratory has developed a new technology called liquid electron microscopy. In a specially designed sample holder microchamber with electron transparent windows, researchers can hold a liquid and take images of structures and particles at nanometer size. It's the first microscope holder of its kind used to investigate the inside of a battery while cycled. This animation illustrates the power of the technology, showing 10 nanometer size gold particles in water.
For the sake of time, I'm going to skip over the other one, but it looks at these advancements that we have. We are working with companies and industries trying to move the technology forward. and advance of life to overcome some of these challenges of dendritic growth and improve performance reliability. And then the third area is looking at some of the work that we've done on the impacts of the electric delivery system. So there's been some studies out there. There was a study with our sister laboratory, PNNL, in the Northwest, where they looked at 70, and their study concluded 73% of current vehicles can be charged with no new plants. But the assumption going into that was if everybody charges overnight. We looked at 13 different NERC regions across the country. NERC is North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and broke it into these 13 different regions. Looked at major deployment of vehicles over 2 time periods from 2020 and 2030. Very different times of charging as well as different power rates. And this gives some of the background to that, where we're looking at 20% of sales or 25% of sales. And that's pretty significant deployment of electric vehicles. When you have 200 million vehicles out on the street, 10%, 20 million electric vehicles, that's significant. So we wanted to get a sense of what these implications would mean in the different regions. And as you go through, and we looked at the different level 1, level 2, and we focused on level 1, level 2. We didn't focus this study on the level 3 charging. And then looked at the times of the charging. But as you can see here, and if you toggle between people charging in the evening versus overnight, you can see that for the utility perspective, overnight, it fills in those troughs, the valleys. But if people start charging in the afternoon, you can see an increased peak. And that's the biggest concern. And so if you can charge smartly, it's going to be able to help in the transition going forward and the interactions with the grid. So that's the takeaway from the study and evaluation that we did. And here, this puts everything on one chart, showing that the different charging levels and whether it was night or evening. And you can see an added peak that shows up. And it can be significant, this peak can be significant if not planned appropriately. So planning is going to be so instrumental. One of the questions I've always had from a planning side, with the utilities, they go through integrated resource plans, plans that look at 10 years down the road. On the transportation side, there's planning that goes on, but to me it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interactions between the two. I think if we look at the future, we need to get these organizations working together to plan our infrastructure, because we have a lot of right-of-ways through the utilities, but also on the transportation side. Is there a way to connect some of those things? Maybe it's the wireless charging technologies that allows us to do that. So these are some things that we can discuss later, but some of the things I think our nation needs to look at as we get ourselves off the dependency on oil. With that, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Ben Eccles. I work at Georgia Power. I'm the program manager for our electric transportation efforts, and glad to be here. Hopefully, I think me and Tom actually stole some of our information, because I'm going to have a lot of the things that he talked about I'm going to talk about as well, but hopefully I won't bore you with some of the same information. First of all, a little bit about Georgia Power Southern Company. If you don't know, we're an investor-owned utility. We're made up Georgia Power, Alabama Power, Gulf Power, and Mississippi Power. We have about 4.4 million retail customers. And as you can see, our generation mix, we are predominantly coal, but we do have some oil, natural gas, some nuclear, and some new nuclear that we'll talk about in a minute. A little history. Believe it or not, this isn't the first time electric vehicles have made an appearance in Atlanta. Actually, back in 1901, the first electric automobile made its way to Atlanta, and it was brought here by Henry Atkinson, one of the founders of Georgia Electric Company, which later became Georgia Power. So, you know, this is not a new technology. As a matter of fact, they were selling these in Atlanta. There's some ads that some of the ladies down the archives group that work at our company were able to provide, and just a little bit of information. Like I said, just you don't think about them being around as long as they have, but they have been here for a while. Another illustration, kind of a picture from, again, from our archives, a meter truck back in 1910, and then a meter vehicle that we used back in 1998 when we kind of started our electric vehicle program. That's actually a RAV4 electric. Georgia Power actually operated and has operated over 450 EVs, and we've logged over 7 million all-electric miles from 1996 to 2003. And these are just an example of some of the vehicles that we had in our fleet. Of course, the EV1, RAV4, some pickup trucks, and even an electric trolley that we actually operated between our buildings that runs downtown. We installed quite a number of charging stations. Actually, Don Francis, which is in the audience, is definitely an expert on infrastructure, and he was very involved in these installations around in and around Atlanta. We had about 300 locations that were public, I'm sorry, 300 locations, 50 of those were public, and then we had 50 public charging installations, and 15 of those were at the malls in and around Atlanta. So destination location charging is probably what you're going to be seeing again when the infrastructure starts to come in. So why electric transportation? Again, it's clean, it's energy efficient, it's cost effective, it's made in the USA, and it definitely holds some future energy sales for us as a utility. Again, why electric transportation? It's clean and it's getting cleaner. Electric versus gasoline and diesel, we definitely have lower emissions. We're more efficient. 40 to 65% greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And again, it's only getting cleaner. We're continuing to build new, cleaner generation. We've got a couple of new nuclear generation plants that are in the planning stages and in the process of construction. So we're only going to be getting cleaner over time. It's one of the fuels that, it's one of the few fuels that you can say that about. Electricity will only continue to get cleaner. So that vehicle that you buy over time is only going to get cleaner. So while electric transportation as well is it's efficient. I've done this kind of calculation, it's kind of a back of the envelope calculation. So and it's very conservative actually on the electric side. But if you look at 1 gallon of gasoline and compare that, there's 36 kilowatt hours of energy in that 1 gallon of gasoline. If we were to compare that to a 36 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack, you can see the big difference in weight, of course. But when you get down to the total miles that you can go probably a little bit more than 90 miles, because I'm doing my calculation based on 400 watts per mile, and that's probably a very conservative number. But to get that same range or that same mileage in gasoline, you're going to have to add an additional 2 gallons of fuel. So based on that, I'd say we're about a third of the energy comparable to a gasoline vehicle. And again, a lot of that is due to the fact that internal combustion engine, while it's it's a great technology, it's not very efficient and never has been very efficient. So, and then again, while electric transportation, as Tom indicated, it's made in the USA. It gets us to energy independence. You know, we're spending $1 billion a day on foreign oil, and we've got to stop that. We've got to be energy independent. We've got to stop spending and sending our troops across the seas to places that and areas that don't really like us, and so we got to be energy independent. A lot of times people ask, so what's different this time? Ben, you've done this before, we're doing it again, what's different? And what I usually go and actually start with is the battery. This chart just illustrates the EVs of the 90s versus the EVs today. And you look at that comparison, you're looking at energy and you're looking at the weight, and you've got probably twice the energy and the same weight of battery. So you've got a lot more energy on board. Again, you've got a battery technology with lithium ion, where you've got manufacturers giving warranties of 100,000 miles plus and 8-year. So we also see a lot of second life uses for that battery. Even after it comes out of the vehicle, there's a lot of second life opportunities for that energy storage. And then again, we've got a variety of vehicles. These are just some of the vehicles that you can consider. I'll put the Model S up there for Paul, so he can appreciate that. But we do have a lot of variety. When we did this back in the 90s, there was only a few vehicles that were available, and so we were kind of limited on what we could actually get in and drive. Again, 20 models expected by the end of 2012. Again, technology improvements. We got charging standards now, which I'll get into a little bit. Fast charging options, and decreasing cost. Batteries are definitely coming down in cost, and we expect that to continue. Residential charging. We expect that 80% of the charging is going to occur in the home. And again, I won't go into a lot of the level 1, level 2 discussions, but other than at home charging, places that we see other charging locations to be is at work. At work is probably going to be the next location that we're going to start spending a lot of time working with some of the businesses downtown to start getting them to look at and consider putting in some charging for their employees. So what is Georgia Power doing to support the plug-in vehicles that are coming on the market? Well, first of all, we're making sure that our grid's ready for these new vehicles as they come on the market. We're developing new rates, and we're helping develop the industry standards for that vehicle charging. And then we're also researching, what's ahead. So when we look at the grid and the impact studies that we've done, we actually take a circuit that we feel like is going to have a high market penetration of electric vehicles, and we start modeling, what that's going to look like and how that's going to affect the reliability of that grid. And based on some of the early studies that we've done, we really expect no near-term impacts, at least in the next 2 to 5 years. And a lot of that's due to the fact that here in the Southeast, we have the advantage of electric air conditioning. And we went through a pretty substantial upgrade back in the 60s and 70s to improve our, at least the generate or the capacity for some of our transformers that are out there. So we really oversized some of those, at least initially. But I think as we get down the road and we get a lot more vehicles on the road, we will begin to see some impacts. And likely that impact will be at the transformer level on the distribution side. So we'll definitely see that, but hopefully not for several years. So what else are we doing? We're designing and allowing our customers to go on to special rates designed specifically for plug-in vehicles. As Paul or as Tom mentioned, if we can get our customers to charge at night, we feel like we've got a lot of capacity to charge those vehicles, and so we got to incentivize those customers to charge at night. So we have designed and we actually got approved a rate back in the last rate case that back in December, and that rate is now available. This is what the rate looks like. It's a whole house rate, so you don't have to separately meter it. It's a time of use rate, so you've got a off-peak, you've got a super off-peak, and then you've got the on-peak, and this is during the summer months. From June 1st to September 30th is when you'll have, again, that on-peak rate. In the wintertime, you only have two buckets. You have a super off-peak and an off-peak. So what does that look like? And as far as cost, during that super off-peak period, you're going to get electricity at about 6 cents a kilowatt hour, and that actually includes the fuel. You're actually getting it at about 1.2 cents a kilowatt hour, and then you add fuel and some of the other charges in there, and it gets up to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And again, compare that to that on-peak during the summer, you're going to be paying about 25 cents a kilowatt hour. So we're trying to, again, incentivize that super off-peak period of time to charge your vehicle. Again, expected annual usage, this is just based on 12,380 miles, and that's about what the amount of kilowatt hours that we expect that you'll use during that year. And you can do the math as far as what that's going to cost you, depending on what rate you're on. So just to summarize, our customers have the ability, we're trying to provide that ability for them to save money over their regular residential rate and provide them a special rate that can definitely save them money if they choose to charge during that super off-peak period. So another thing that we're doing is we're trying to develop the standards. We've got standards for level 1, level 2, but we currently do not have that DC or that level 3 standard. So we're working with the manufacturer to develop that standard. There's actually a lot of infrastructure that's going to be put in the ground over the next 6 to 8 months that is not going to be this standard, but hopefully we'll learn in those areas where that infrastructure is going in, how these devices are going to be used, and we'll get some good data that allow us to, as the standard does, and when it does come out, we'll have some good data to know where we need to put these and how much they're going to be used. And then what's ahead? I don't have any fancy videos like Tom has, but this kind of illustrates what we think is ahead. And that first area that he talked about, either vehicle to grid or vehicle to home, and we feel like it's down the road, but at some point we can see where the vehicle might be able to come in, and when we have a peak demand period, the vehicle could pick up the load on that house. So initially we may see a vehicle to home scenario, and then on down the road you might see a vehicle to grid where we actually put some energy back on the grid. A lot of technology's got to come into play before that happens, but I do think that we'll see that at some point. So just to summarize, the plug-in vehicle market's here. We actually have customers already on our PEV rate. We've got a customer that's down in Dublin, Georgia, that went and bought a Volt. Even though they're not available, here in our market, they are going out of state buying these vehicles, and they're bringing them back and they're plugging them in. So we're anticipating a lot more of that in the next year or so. So we'll have questions later, but just if you've got other questions or you wanted more information, you can go to our website. We do have a website that's specifically designed to answer questions about electric vehicles. And then if you have even more questions, I recommend you going out to the NPVI, which is the National Plug-in Vehicle Initiative website, and that's goelectric.com. So thank you.
Hi, and good afternoon. I'm Paul Lomangino, and I'm here as a representative of Tesla Motors and of the automotive industry that is developing and, more importantly, delivering electric vehicles to the market today. I am also a serial Georgia Tech graduate, but that's perhaps a story for another time. So I'll keep my talk kind of brief. I'll put in as many pretty pictures as possible. Um, so my plan here is to talk about who Tesla Motors is, what our mission is, the products that we make, and a little bit about our corporate identity, and to talk a bit about some of our challenges and opportunities. So who is Tesla Motors? Our mission, can help define who we are. Our mission is to convert transportation from its current petroleum-based to one using electricity. As our CEO, Elon Musk, says, we won't stop until every car on the road is electric. That's a pretty big challenge, and we know we've got a lot of work to achieve that. However, we have a plan towards doing that. Sorry. A little better now? All right, thank you. This whole public speaking thing is kind of new for me. So part of our plan is towards the design and production of Tesla branded vehicles like the Roadster, and you saw Southern Company's Roadster outside. Thank you very much for bringing that in, Ben. I appreciate that. It's nice to show that this isn't vaporware, that this is real. It's happening right now. And this also happens with our upcoming Model S sedan. And I'll talk a little bit about both of those products. So the Roadster, first is the Roadster. This was our first product. We unveiled it in 2006, started delivery in 2008, and we've delivered around 1,600 of these into customers' hands. So this is real. The Roadster is a demonstration that electric cars don't have to be an unfavorable compromise. It's a beautiful car. Okay, that's subjective, but I believe it's a beautiful car. It's fast. It has great range and has supercar handling. So talking about performance, it can go 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, gets 245 miles on a charge, and by the way, that's twice the range of what other EVs claim, and it's well over the average daily driving range of Americans, which is about 40 miles. And when you recharge it, depending on whether you're off-peak or on-peak, it's about $8 to recharge to get fully 245 miles. Now, what we've noticed also with Roadster owners, this is our base of knowledge on how people use electric cars, is that they're not waiting for their car's batteries to be depleted before they recharge. They recharge when they go home or whenever they find a plug, much as what Tom had alluded to in his discussion. So there's a lot of charging going on at home at night, but also whenever there's a plug available. So on this car, you might notice that price is a bit of a premium. But that's following a successful technology introduction model from flat screen TVs, cell phones, laptops, where early adopters are much like early investors, where their adoption helps bring in the economies of scale that help drive the costs down to yield more affordable products in the future. So far things are working pretty well. The Tesla Roadsters have driven over 10 million electric miles. I think we're close to 10.7 at this point. Saved over 26,000 barrels of oil, 500,000 gallons of gas, and 5.3 million pounds of carbon dioxide emissions. So since we are at Georgia Tech, we'll talk a little bit about the technology. The motor is a 3-phase, 4-pole AC induction motor that produces 248 horsepower and 298 pound-feet of torque. But the key point is that it produces that at 0 RPM. And so this is what enables this really great acceleration of 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. You have all that torque available to you from the start. And then the torque stays flat throughout the rev range, and the motor spins up to 14,000 RPM. And so and it makes a great sound getting there too, by the way. But that's getting into Formula One car and superbike territory. So it's a really great piece of technology. Perhaps even more key to this particular discussion, though, is the battery. And our battery pack, we have proprietary battery pack technology. We use commodity lithium-ion cells. In fact, about a little less than 7,000 of them in our battery packs. Our battery packs are electronically and thermally controlled in order to monitor temperature variation and to prevent any sort of thermal runaway. The pack in the Roadster stores 56 kilowatt hours of energy, and this is what enables us to get the 245-mile range. The battery pack can be recharged from completely discharged to completely full in about 4 hours. Recharging can be done from like any 110 socket or 220 socket, but using a lower rated charger or lower rated source won't get you as fast a charge. We also use regenerative brakes to recapture energy that was normally converted to heat under braking, but we also put mechanical brakes in parallel because stopping performance and brake feel are important to a sports car. So next we'll talk a little bit about Model S. The Model S is really the vision of where Tesla wants to go. It's about making good on our promise to deliver more affordable transportation. It'll cost about half of what the Roadster does. So the Model S will have seating for 7, which is an interesting packaging challenge. And it's got a really good, and even then it's got really good passenger and cargo space. How do we do that? Well, part of it is we re-architected the battery. So in the Roadster, the battery pack is a fairly large lump that's in the back of the car that takes up a lot of space. Within the Model S, we re-architected the battery to be in the floor of the car. Beyond that, power electronics and motor take up a relatively small amount of space. So that leaves a lot of space for people and stuff. So the all-electric powertrain, the battery has range options for 160, 230, or 300 miles, depending on which battery pack you choose. Good acceleration, 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds. Also, we support, this battery pack in here supports a 45-minute fast charge. So this will help alleviate the concerns about taking the car on range or being stranded when you have to recharge your car. So, I'm going to switch gears here, so to speak, have a little video. This will relieve you of having to listen to me.
Bringing the Model S to life is about an uncompromised approach in your automotive choice. I gotta have kind of product.
Like a wow I've never experienced before.
I've worked on the Volkswagen Beetle, the Audi TT, started up a design studio in North Hollywood with Johnny Rose. Left there to be the head of design for Model 7 North America. Model S is a four-door sedan. It's 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds. We'll have 3 different range options, up to 300 miles. I'm heavily involved and was named on all the early patents that we filed here at Tesla and won Innovator of the Year from MIT. Well, I think the Silicon Valley DNA is critical to the company. That DNA lets us iterate very quickly and bring new technologies to market much faster. I started with Google right after it had emerged from its IPO. I was the chief architect for the staffing organization. So my job was to take the company from 2,500 individuals to 20,000 individuals in a little over 3 years. I created the best team by none, and did the same thing with Tesla. The Model S, it's leveraging a lot of the same systems and inventions that we put into the Roadster, but the risk of the development time and the cost of the vehicle are dramatically reduced. The simultaneous engineering and design collaborative effort is something that is really unique.
And we do that by communicating the complementary groups and skill sets.
We're able to communicate very, very rapidly between design and engineer.
Therefore, we can then find solutions to the issue very quickly. I've been working about almost 25 years in the automotive industry, working for global automotive companies. I was a vice president in charge of manufacturing for the Lexus plant in Canada. It's the only Lexus plant outside Japan.
I've been at the forefront of lightweight aluminum structure and architecture design.
I was one of the first people to take CAD and actually apply it to the design of stampings in an automobile. The emphasis that we place upon CAE simulations, which become genuinely representative of the end product, will dramatically reduce the cost and lead time of the Model S program. We're using CAD in order to simulate the actual assembly equipment and assembly process. We have acquired a press line. It's made of 5 different presses. And we use these presses to actually stamp and form the panels. And we are also involving very early some key suppliers. I've been playing a big role in leading facilities that make 200,000 vehicles a year. We find it very achievable and very much in our range to make a 20,000 vehicle a year facility for Model S.
Building 20,000 units is absolutely achievable. Being late and being over budget is just not an option. We know that Model S needs to be efficient, on time, incredibly manufactured, and a beautiful car.
Mission, which is to convert transportation to using electricity. We did that by the cars like the Roadster and the Model S, but we also are partnered with other OEMs to provide electric powertrains and electric powertrain technology. So Daimler and Toyota are two companies that have partnered with us by buying a stake in Tesla Motors. With Daimler, we produce battery packs for their smart electric car and for their A-Class electric car. Both of those are in production. The Smart has been in production for about a year, and I think deliveries for the electric Smart has actually even started in the United States already. The A-Class, I believe, is a European-only vehicle. For Toyota, we are working on an all-electric RAV4, and that should be coming out soon. And then beyond the product, what else is there about Tesla Motors? We are about 7 years old and have about 1,000 employees. We did have a successful IPO in June of 2010. That was a great party. And it's the first successful IPO for a car company since Ford Motor Company in 1956. So we have our corporate headquarters in Palo Alto, California. We have our design studio in Hawthorne, California, which is near Los Angeles. And our new vehicle factory, which we bought from Toyota, is in Fremont, California. And a little bit about that factory. That factory under Toyota was capable of producing nearly 500,000 cars per year. So that gives us a little bit of runway and a little bit of room to grow. We have 18 stores worldwide, and 9 of them are in the US. So let's talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that a company like Tesla faces. So, if you ask people a few years ago, what came to mind when you thought of an electric car, the impression hadn't been very favorable. Usually something that was, let's call it generously, something only a mother could love. Unsafe, perhaps unattractive to the general public, poor performing, slow, and limited range. We are changing that perception with cars like the Roadster and the Model S. Also, the laws that govern electric cars are sometimes playing catch-up with the technology. When we were bringing the Roadster to different markets, we would come to the market and they wouldn't know what to do, how to homologate a car that didn't consume gasoline and didn't produce hydrocarbon emissions for exhaust. And say, how many liters of fuel do you consume per kilometer? 0. No, you can't. Have to give us a real number. Nothing. So also, as a new OEM with a new technology, we've made the decision to shy away from a dealership model because we feel that it's very important that we control the experience of the customer. However, that approach sometimes has its challenges. For example, we can't have an OEM or a store in the state of Georgia. Also, another challenge more organizationally, as a company's transform from being a startup to being a production-oriented company. When you're a startup, what you're trying to do is prove out the idea of a technology that's viable, that's possible to make, and you want to sell that idea to investors. We're working through that. We've gotten through that. Now we have to make good on those promises and actually make this work, make it profitable, make it a viable business model. And we're doing that, but it's not. However, in the face of those challenges, we have a lot of really good opportunities. We can make attractive, fun-to-drive cars that have significant benefits not only for this country but also for the world in general. Also, being in a position of technology leadership, we can help set the standards for electric vehicles and use. We also started from close to scratch. We had very little legacy of baggage and older systems and obligations, ways of doing things that would constrain our future ways of doing business and our future products. So those opportunities for Red Third has allowed us to attract many of the best and brightest from electronics and automotive and other industries. They're highly capable, motivated, and really believe in the Tesla mission. And so we really need that energy, enthusiasm, experience, and knowledge to achieve this accelerated product development that's necessary for our success. So our success so far has given us some opportunities. We've secured backing from the Department of Energy in the form of a $465 million loan to cut carbon emissions and promote energy independence and security, and that is directly into the development of the Model S and the Model S factory. And then as an additional benefit, with the adoption of electric cars, electric vehicle buyers in the U.S., not just Teslas, but can take advantage of the $7,500 federal tax credit, and I believe in Georgia you get a 20% income tax credit for purchasing. You can also take advantage of the carpool lanes even if you're not actually carpooling. So as I sum up, I kind of like this quote. The Stone Age will come to an end not for a lack of stones, and the Oil Age will come to an end not for lack of oil. This really is describing and indicating a fundamental shift in the balance of energy sourcing. The technology is enabling a diversification of energy that can be used for transportation to serve the world's needs. So we at Tesla believe the future of automotive transport is electric. So thank you for your time and attention.
I imagine there are questions out there.
This question is for Tom, and I'm not an experienced pro in electric and battery power, so forgive me for the lack of intelligence in it. But
Well, neither am I, so we can converse here.
from what little I know about photovoltaic, when it happens, it's inverted so that you can use it in your AC home and get the power out of the AC outlet with all of your AC appliances. With your parking photovoltaic that you showed and the cars that are plugged in, is there an inverter there that converts it to AC plug-in for the car to plug in? And if so, is there any discussion about collecting photovoltaic, keeping it DC for a car that accepts DC direct without an AC interchange?
Well, a lot of times the energy storage devices are going to be DC, and so people are talking about, within the home, there's so many things that run on DC that why do we have AC at the home? And they're looking at DC, and it goes back to the the 1900s with Westinghouse and Edison duking it out. And so we're probably going to be looking at homes that tie in, if you have the PV side, can you get a DC circuit within the home that ties in, things that are run on, with all the TVs, computers, things like that have the DC side. So there's a lot of discussion from the design to look at those types of things. But for the solar assisted charging and those efforts that we have, power electronics plays a key role, whether it's the conversion of DC to AC, but typically, you're going to see that, the inverter technologies tying in, for example, with the PV system. We have a 50 kW system. There's an inverter. We tie that power into our electric delivery side. Some of the technology that we have with the power electronics is DC-DC conversion. So it's either stepping up or down the voltage. So power electronics is going to play a key role. It's just what do you need in the way of power conversion that's necessary? And the more that you can optimize that system and reduce the number of times that you go from DC to AC back to DC, the lower cost that you're going to have.
Yeah, batteries are getting better slowly. They're not great, but I think the car downstairs proves that batteries are good enough for some uses. Charging times are a problem. Pumping gasoline into the tank today transfers energy about 1,000 times as fast as the Tesla 240-volt expensive charger. 3 orders of magnitude is hard to make up. What do we do about that?
That's a great question. And that's where some of the fast charging, when you look at level 3, that goes, instead of 8 hours of charging, it gets to 30 minutes at 80% state of charge. But even, is that going to be fast enough? And there's going to have to be a big cultural shift as we start to look at the electrification side.
Yeah, and I would agree the fast charge is one of these ways that will help alleviate that burden. Additionally, it's a different use model in how you put energy into your car. People will charge their cars as they have availability of a place to plug in, and so perhaps they're not needing to do a full charge nearly as frequently.
Just one other thing that I would add to that is they are working on this. There's actually a bus project that's in Pomona, California, where they're going to be doing bus charging at 500 kilowatt. So in a minute's time, they're putting in a lot of energy into that battery. So it's happening. So I don't know if I want to be on that bus when they charge it, but.
I was wondering if you could talk about the next generation of batteries and the research you guys are doing and how quickly you think they're going to come to market.
That's a really good question. What does the next generation battery look like, and where's the technology going to go? A lot of research is going on beyond lithium, because lithium has made a lot, and as we saw on Ben's chart, there has been significant progress that has been made over the past 2 decades. So where is this going to evolve to? There's going to be a lot of work that goes on thin film processing, so thin film batteries. That research will continue. It's going to be getting the weight out of these systems. Power density, energy densities, those are going to continue to be the advancements in looking at the cost side. So what are the new material systems that are going to be looked at? There's a lot of research that's going in. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure we've identified what the next generation battery. So there's 2 elements to that. One is understanding the degradation of the systems. And that's research with existing materials, material systems. And then the other piece is, what other material systems can we be looking at? And there's technologies that we've discovered at the laboratory. For example, lithium sulfur. And historically, the sulfur has poisoned the lithium in the charging-discharging side. But there are carriers that have been developed in the electrolyte that move the sulfur back onto the electrode from where it started versus poisoning the lithium electrodes. So instead of getting cycles of 10 cycles before poison, we've seen like 1,000 cycles. So it's this type of research that's going to be going on, but there may be technologies that we're not necessarily aware of at this point for the next generation.
Fellow with Tesla, you mentioned that there's a difficulty in getting a company store here in Georgia. What are the actual details of that, if you're familiar with those issues? And the second question, where can I get information on that commercial step van?
The Freightliner step van. That was a project that we have with Freightliner that I think I neglected to mention. But that's a project we're developing with Freightliner, essentially to take the same sort of battery pack technology and apply it to a commercial van. And that's yielding very good results so far. So my understanding of the commercial issues with the state of Georgia is that there are laws against the OEM owning its own distribution chain, and that stores have to follow the dealership model, which is essentially a franchise. And so because of that, we cannot have a Tesla-owned store within the state of Georgia.
I believe there's a company in Israel that may be doing business in Japan that you can go in and they just swap out the battery, which seems to solve the time problem.
Better Place. They're across the street from us.
And then you can do all your recharging at night. Are there technical or commercial problems to that model?
Well, one of the things with a battery pack, like the swappable model, it sounds great, and it's definitely something that's an option. But as Tom alluded to in his talk, you have a great deal of the cost of the car tied up in the price of the battery. Call it $10,000. And so when you go into a swapping station, you're taking the battery pack that you've got and swapping it with somebody else's battery pack. And so if this is going to be a viable model, there are going to have to be guarantees around the quality of the battery pack, what life is left in that battery pack. Oh, I'm sorry. What are you swapping your good battery pack for? So there are a lot of things that have to be figured out around that. Better Place is also working on commercializing and the electrical infrastructure for delivering electricity and monetizing that. So they have some very good ideas.
Ben? Every time I get a new appliance or a new air conditioner, it's more efficient than the last one. And, I think I've got a 13-SEER air conditioner now, and I see 17. And do you see this freeing up generating capacity to charge these EVs, or is our greediness going to short-circuit all that?
Well, I think you're correct. I think energy efficiency is definitely going to play a role in what we do in the future for generation capacity. I mean, we definitely have, and we're spending a lot of efforts on energy efficiency and trying to. We got some programs that are getting rolled out for energy efficiency. So I think you're right. That is definitely going to free up some energy. But we've also got, with that energy efficiency gains, we're also, again, growing the state, and that's only going to continue. So.
One of the things, and maybe I'll ask Ben this question, we've been working with other utility companies. When you start to look at some of these technologies, energy efficient technologies, the higher SEER rated air conditioning systems, utilities have come to us and said, well, these systems don't have the ride-through capabilities. So if there's a reduction in voltage as low as 30%, you get these systems that stall out this inrush of current up to 6 times the amount that you see. So you get these unintended consequences. And this is where when you have new technologies and energy efficiency is a great example. What are some of those unintended consequences? Have you seen that from the Southeast? I know over in California and the Midwest, they've seen some of those issues. Is that something that Georgia Power Southern has looked at and seen challenges?
Oh yeah, we're definitely working on that and looking into it. We've got a group that works out of Alabama. That's where our research group is, and they're definitely looking into that.
The phenomenon, it's some people refer to it with different things, but it's looking at the voltage. If there's a drop in voltage up to as low as 30%, so you have 70% voltage, you get these technologies. The motors don't have the ride through and the torque, so they'll stall and lock up. And as they lock up, you get this inrush of current. And from that current, it could be 6 times the amount of normal current that you might see. And so that just keeps going until it hits a thermal limit, and then it shuts off. And so during these times, if you get these, instability issues going on with a number of them, companies in California, for example, are concerned that this is going to elevate not just from the distribution side, but up to the sub-transmission level.
I have a question directed initially to Tom King, but the rest of you as well. You focused a lot on the nation. I noticed it capitalized in one of your slides even. What about the rest of the world? Our national security is partly linked to independence for us, but it's also linked to what the status of the rest of the world is. And do you think at all about that? I noticed that Tesla is talking about the world as a market, but your focus was on sort of the nation. So I'm just curious about what's happening in the rest of the world on this score, on electric vehicles and on the grid. China is a big, obviously, it's a big one. India, right. You pick your country.
Right. And at the laboratory, we're looking a lot on the international front. There really is, when I say the nation and energy independence, it's not really just saying we're going to build walls around the U.S., but we want to make sure that from energy independence, we're not dependent on certain nations and countries. So with that, but there's been discussions. We've been having discussions with China. We're part of a team working together on the research side that looks at the transportation side. It looks at buildings. It looks at renewables and solar. There's a new effort now that is dealing with and focused on China. It's a PACE-R program partnership with the research energy systems, and there's a deployment side and a research side. So there's a lot of discussions and focus and attention on the energy issues globally. And there's partnerships in putting the technologies together, in doing the research.
So what we see is the grid growing to accommodate the adoption of electric cars, and the rate of adoption depends on many different factors, and there are many different models that people have used to predict the rate of adoption. But our point is we want to sell globally, and we are selling globally, and electric power can be generated wherever via multiplicity of sources. So, but the delivery of that electrical power, the grid, and the technology used to bring that is somewhat out of our scope, but we need to work with the companies that do that to make sure we have compatible technologies.
And then the other part on the international front that's going on is looking at the entire supply chain. And so instead of being dependent on oil, are we going to now be dependent on lithium? Are we going to be dependent on other materials? And so there's a big effort that's going on looking at critical and strategic materials. And that's for the whole entire energy supply chain.
My question. My question is omnidirectional. We've been pulling freight across this country for almost 100 years without plugging in any of the diesel electrics. We've been building high-capacity forklift trucks in 150,000 pound capacity as hybrids for a long, long time. Why can't we scale down the hybrid technology to suit the problem? The stopgap measures that Toyota has created and others really don't satisfy the need, and yet the locomotive industry and the forklift industry seems to have no problem pushing stuff around with hybrids.
I would answer that. I would answer that question and say we all need to look in the mirror, because ultimately it's every one of us that's got to change the culture. Why don't we have more mass transit systems around here? Well, because I like to have flexibility in when I go to work and when I leave for work, because I have to take Johnny here or Sally over there. It's going to be a cultural change if we're going to do everything, and it's going to take every one of us. We have to look in the mirror.
Our approach, we're focusing on battery electric vehicles. We've decided early on that we didn't want to focus on hybrid technologies. We wanted to make the best electric car possible and not, and not bring in a hybrid. So from that, one of the key challenges is taking a look at people's driving behaviors, as Tom had mentioned, wanting to have ultimate flexibility, having all of the capabilities that we've grown used to with internal combustion engines, but providing those capabilities and more within the battery. But there are some things that, there are some cultural shifts and there's some behavior changes that might be required in order to get the most out of that shift in technology.
Just let me add that it is happening. It is happening right now. There's a group called HTUF, which is the Hypertruck Users Forum, and we had that conference here in Atlanta about a year and a half ago. But they are building Class 8 hybrid trucks. We actually have some operating in Atlanta right now. Coca-Cola has got a fleet of probably 8 to 10 trucks, Don, that are operating. So that technology is being scaled down, and it is happening right now. We actually have some plug-in hybrids in our fleet. We've got some bucket trucks that we're testing. So it's happening, and I think you're going to continue to see that happen over many different classes of vehicles in the years to come.
It'll be slow. I mean, these things can't happen overnight, but.
I have a question about the about your supply diversity and grant funding opportunities. We recently submitted a proposal to Department of Energy and met the primary and secondary requirements for our battery and fuel cell technology for both our electric propulsion system and for residential and commercial use for power plants. But one of the issues we find is either R&D money, but there's not a lot of money to help small businesses get into the commercialization unless you partner with major, corporations. So what opportunities can any of you gentlemen suggest? Either is it the supply diversity track that you follow? Is it government funding to help small businesses with viable technologies enter into the market or support you in making your cars go further with our nice battery?
So let me see if I understand the question correctly. So from a small company perspective, essentially how do you make it, right? How do you gain entry? And so, yeah, as a company, I mean, Tesla, we started off, it wasn't very many years ago, we were a very tiny company, and on the automotive scale, 1,000 employees is still minuscule. And so essentially what enabled our success was very early demonstration of capability against a known need. So when we started off, people didn't like gas prices, but they weren't railing against them. But still, there was the demonstration that you could have a usable electric car. And so I think that's really is the path, is trying to find early investors that will believe in your mission, will enable you to take that next step to be able to demonstrate your technology and your capability. And that will get you more attention and access to the right audiences to see what you can do.
The question's towards me. So at Oak Ridge, we are our boss is the Department of Energy, and so we try to support DOE's mission. One of the opportunities, there's loan guarantee programs that they have, and they're moving forward. Also, there's small business innovation grants. So if there's technology that needs to be developed, there's opportunities in different phases to go through that. And that's helping to develop the ideas as well as then the demonstration side. At the laboratory, we partner with, we'll partner with large companies, small companies, in trying to get the technologies out the door. Those are a couple opportunities that there are through the federal government. And then depending on what the business model and approach is, being able to bring in, get the investments, that we've seen through Tesla. I think it was a great example, through the IPO. So, it's always a challenge to go through it, but from the small business side, that's really the heart of this country. And trying to be able to get these ideas and technologies commercialized is not easy, but there are some steps and opportunities through the government where you can get these loan guarantees, or from the research side, if it still needs to be developed, looking at some of those grants.
Excuse me, I just have a yes or no question, so no need to elaborate. The wireless charging, is that a feasible option for EVs?
Yes. Well, right, and so there's more to it than just the yes and no. Can you get the cost down on the technology? That's one of the questions that's going to happen. But for us, are there ways that you can look at inductive charging stationary and then as you're mobile? So can you tie in some of the infrastructure where as you're driving over the interstate, there's sections where you're charging, and then there's sections of the interstate where you're discharging. So those are some of the ideas and concepts. It will take a while, but I think it's an area that we need to pursue to look at different pathways to get some of these costs down. So that's why I would say yes, it's challenging from the cost side, but when you start to look 10 years down the road, are these viable pathways? They could very well be.
One more charging question about capacitors. What role can they play in energy storage?
Okay. There's the balance of energy versus power, and with capacitors, great on the power side. Looking at the ability to discharge number of times, yes, the life is higher, but how do you get the energy out and have the energy? So depending on the applications, capacitors will play a key role in elements of the vehicle. When you start to look at stationary applications from energy storage, there's projects that have looked at ultra capacitors. Once again, it's a cost issue, but it's being able to manage what is the application, and is it for power or is it for energy? And right now, the capacitors typically have been on the power side. I don't know, Ben, if you have.
Yeah, I would just, the only comment I would have is like you're right. I think there are applications for ultra caps, and a lot of that's got to do with some of the braking. A lot of times you can't capture all that energy in braking, so you still, even when you do have regenerative braking, you're not able to capture all of that. And ultra caps can play a key technology that can enable that.
Two things before we adjourn. First, let's thank our speakers. Great. Second, remember May 18th, it's the next program, and it will be in the College of Management in the large auditorium on the first floor. Thanks very much for being here.